Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, BabyMetal fan. And I'm going to talk today about Shanti, 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 the fourth track off the Metal Galaxy album. But I'm going to do something a little different. Instead of just walking through it and rambling on about my own subjective responses to the lyrics, I'm going to draw on the expertise of a couple of other people. These are not Japanese speakers. They're not experts on BabyMetal. They are experts on India, and both as sort of lived experience and in terms of their own academic specialties. I felt that with this song, I didn't want to be the lone voice. I wanted to draw on what other people were thinking about the song, particularly since songs like this sometimes attract questions about issues of cultural appropriation and the rights and wrongs of dabbling in other people's musical forms, their cultural forms, and so on. And this obviously is a song that does that, and I wanted to hear what other people have to say about it. So it's not going to be a line-by-line breakdown. It's going to be a more general conversation about BabyMetal and specifically about Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. As ever, like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Okay, so today we have a special edition of whatever it is that I do here. This is the first video I have made with two guests. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Kaustavi Sakar, who got her PhD in dance studies and digital humanities from Ohio State University, currently assistant professor of dance with me at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. She's a dancer, choreographer, and educator with a specialty in Odissi. Am I saying that correctly?
That's right, Andrew. Odissi is from Orissa.
A form of East Indian classical dance and in cultural theory. We share an office building, though I haven't been in it for a year. Have you?
Yeah, more than a year, isn't it?
It's brutal. Yeah, yeah. Though I think did we meet for the first time at a book club event?
That's so true. So
yeah.
I read your book on Steeplejack. I think it was the third sequel or the second sequel.
I think the Steeplejack is the first one.
Steeplejack is the first one because I was a test reader.
That's right, you were. So it's been a few years, though not as many as I've known Sujata, Dr. Sujata Iyengar, who got her PhD at Stanford, is currently professor of English at the University of Georgia, where she specializes in English Renaissance literature, Shakespearean adaptation and appropriation, book history and arts, and the health humanities. She is extensively published and is a regular at Shakespeare and other early modern conferences, which is where we first met. And I want to say that that was about 20 years ago, which is terrifying.
It was, and you know what? It wasn't the first time we met. It was the student. I can't remember. I don't remember her. Believe I don't remember her name. She was in a car accident. She's a very dear student of yours. She was at the University of Georgia, and yes, and we all went out. My daughter rather, was not born yet, and yours was a baby.
Right.
And we went to dinner at a really terrible Athens Mexican restaurant. I mean, in those days, my friend Roxanne used to say Athens doesn't have Mexican food. It's got Mexican shaped food, because it was so bad, right? And then she just said Beth, she was called, I think. I can't believe I'm blanking on her name, but anyway, but she said, you'll really like each other. And it turned out that you were from Preston and I was from Manchester.
Right.
And we had a lot in common, but you were working on a screenplay and you had not published yet.
That's true. So it has been a long time.
It's been a really long time, yes. So,
yeah.
So I'm one of those people who can say I knew him back when.
When he was even
I said,
more
how do you manage to get all this writing done? And you said, my wife's in medical school and she's gone a lot in the evenings.
That's probably, that's a fairly accurate assessment, yeah. So, I wanted to invite you guys here to talk about this particular song because as your backgrounds demonstrate, not only do you have interest in Indian culture and music and dance and so on, but you also have interest in the sort of cultural issues around intercultural connectedness and the politics of appropriation and things like that. And it's one of the subjects that has sort of ghosted not just this song, but this is the fourth song off their third album, off Metal Galaxy. And at the beginning of the album, they talk about how the album is going to be a journey through the Metal Galaxy, though the Metal Galaxy is figured as metal influenced music from other places. And they talk about how they have talked about in interviews the way that the album was shaped by their sort of increasingly global fan base and wanting to sort of make kinds of connections. I should say, I should ask, am I right in thinking that this is not a group that you were extensively familiar with?
No, I mean, my daughter, the one who just graduated, has been telling me for a while I need to listen to Gimme Chocolate. So she and both my kids had heard of the group when I mentioned it to them, and they were laughing at me, you know. So
yes, Gimme Chocolate is the gateway drug. It was the song that became a sort of viral hit. They performed it on Stephen Colbert's show. What, about five or 6 years ago, I think, because they've been around. We were just saying for 10 years. So this is interesting because most of the time when you see people reacting to BabyMetal stuff online, they are fans of the band, and all the Indian people who I've seen responding to this song come into it with that prior investment, and that obviously is going to color the way they respond. So I specifically wanted you guys to share your responses. So I'm going to share my screen, and as I said before, we're going to break this up a whole bunch of times. Anytime you see anything that you want to talk about, just shout, and I will do my best for once in my life to shut up.
I like the kaleidoscope.
I was going to ask about that because one of my first questions when I saw this video the first time, all those sort of kaleidoscope effects, and I found myself wondering, is this Indian or is this psychedelia circa 1967?
I thought it was psychedelic. I mean,
Yeah.
I've no idea if it's Indian or not, though I do, of course, I remember my parents like showing me my first kaleidoscope. My mother loved it. She said she always wanted one as a kid and never got one. So she got one for me. So those two things are mixed up for me. Was it Indian or was it psychedelic? But with the whole, is that an electric sitar? I don't even know that's playing at the beginning. I'm thinking George Harrison.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the questions, right? Is this a pastiche? Is it a representation of a Western notion of a certain version of India, or is it more genuinely, organically Indian?
That's a tough one, Andrew. How can you have anything genuine in
Right.
pop, right? In pop culture, it's all enmeshed and abstracted. As you're saying kaleidoscope, Sujata, I was also thinking in my head, but I was also thinking of mandala.
Oh, you're right. Yes, Rangoli as well. All those patterns that are symmetrical. Yes. Right.
So mandala is this idea which is so vast, right? And it spans across Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism and Tantrism and whatnot, right? So I think it's all over the place. But it's clearly a technological, psychedelic abstraction of whatever it is.
Right. And obviously those kind of images mesh with the sort of the content of the song. They're not simply being superimposed on something that has nothing to do with it.
And I think it sounds like we both agree, Kaustavi, that, I mean, if you're talking about like, there's no pure culture. If there ever was, there certainly can't be now. And I don't know that it would be a good thing if there were, you know.
Right.
You can't get back to, especially, this is a really loaded topic in India right now, right? Is there or is there not a pure version of Hinduism? Of course there is not.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, I only ask the question because, you know, bands like Coldplay have found themselves in hot water over things that are more clearly appropriative, in which they use songs that have nothing to do with the culture and then center themselves within a particular festival or something like that, simply for visual effects.
Yeah, that was kind of obnoxious.
Okay, so that's going to be that's one of my questions as we go, is to sort of give us a little nuance on what makes them different. But let me play a little bit more.
Play a little bit more. I know you, because I could talk for the whole over the whole thing, for the whole thing, and afterwards.
That's why you're here. So, okay. Sorry, I one of the things that I love about BabyMetal is that they just make me happy, and I don't always understand why, which is why I started doing these videos in the first place, to try and figure out my own sort of weirdly emotional and generally positive response to the material.
They seem really happy. It's contagious. I mean,
yes.
they're obviously loving what they do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the words I picked out that were familiar to you, of course, Shanti, Shanti. And hey, I'll tell you something that really made me happy. My yoga studio, which is, of course, white American, has stopped ending classes with namaste and saying Shanti. And they said this is a response to I never complained, right? Because generationally, that's not my style. I'm the auntie, right? But the kids all complain, right? And so so
what's the difference?
Between using it and not using it. I guess Shanti, for me in a yoga practice, I mean, it's not just exercises, right? I mean, the physical yoga is just, it's like step 3 on the Patanjali's yoga tree. It goes with like restraining your diet, restraining your speech, practicing nonviolence, and all these kinds of things if you're actually doing yoga. Now, the exercises are really good in themselves. And then a namaste, it's always kind of stupid because it's what you do to greet somebody, namaskar or namaste. Why do you say it you don't say it to say goodbye usually? I mean, you might do obeis, and then the bowing down to the teacher and bowing down to somebody. I mean, I actually do it now because it's good for my hips, but but I kind of resist it. And also if it's one of these like old boomer ladies, they mean so well. I don't want to break their heart by complaining.
I'm really having such a good time, but I do have to confess that my entry to yoga, despite being an Indian classical dancer, was through white people.
Yeah.
And training in America, unfortunately, right? And talk about cultural appropriation and erasure. So there is something there, definitely. I do want to also, just caution that there is this also incipient sort of right-wing appropriation, which is almost there everywhere, as in like local newsletters in Charlotte and Raleigh. So I just also want to, I don't know, peel our conversation with that dangerous saffron color as well, if you know what I mean. Andrew.
No, I know what you mean. And I was going to say actually that one of the good things about US yoga and is that it has a chance to, as you say, peel itself away from colorist, caste, and other kinds and ableist sorts of practices, that the way that some versions of it traditionally have been practiced. I mean, what I really object to most of all are the studios in the US that reinforce these practices unthinkingly, or that think they can go to India, go to a retreat, and then somehow jump into a high wealth caste and ignore the surroundings of the ashram or whatever. That makes me kind of crazy. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
I give myself one pose a year. So I have a long leeway out of myself.
See, whereas I learned from my mother, who learned from her grandfather. So it's kind of and my last name's Iyengar after all. So.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that means.
Iyengar yoga, one of the big practitioners who popularized yoga in the West was BKS Iyengar, who's his book Light on Yoga. He's the one who suggests that you use props, and it works two ways. I don't actually like what is called Iyengar yoga the way it's been taught to me, because they'll move you to be in the right pose, and there is no right pose. It's what's right for your body. But a good thing they did that made it accessible to many more different kinds of bodies was using props, cushions, blocks, you know, I don't know, sling, whatever, slings in the fancier places.
So since we're talking about movement, do you see any relevance of any of that kind of thing in what they're doing on stage?
I do, but I'm not the dancer, so I'm very ignorant.
Please share your thoughts, Sujata. I mean, I seem to be out of my I don't know, expertise here. It is like the Bollywoodized, you know, the commercial dance that my students in the Department of Dance want to do, but the department doesn't offer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I mean, in terms of gesture, like I wonder, like, you know, how hard it is to get some mudras right? Like some gestures, you could just get it from internet and you could probably do a little better job on that. They are very good movers and they are moving well, but they could have colored it a little bit, artistically speaking, aesthetically speaking.
Okay. Play a little more. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Sujata.
Yeah, I have a comment about that title you mentioned, Metal Galaxy. I mean, are they science fiction in their kind of orientation at all? Because they're wearing the outfits are sort of Cardassian, aren't they? Like Star Trek, those big shoulders and everything, and the kind of metallic theme going on.
They have from the beginnings. They've had a sort of fantasy sci-fi kind of component in the sort of self-presentation, and a lot of the way that a lot of the songs have this sort of epic, you know, metal kind of sound, and some of them have clear sort of fantasy and sci-fi components built in. Yeah. So the very first song on the album sort of presents it all as a journey across the galaxy kind of
okay
thing.
Cool. Yeah, because I was thinking like one of my favorite albums ever is Okay Computer, because it is a narrative, it's a story, and I love every single one of those songs. So
yeah, and you know, especially some of the songs will dip more into a sort of prog rock kind of sound. That this is sort of an unusual one because they're foregrounding more of the sort of the Indian electronically constructed Indian instrumentation, but they don't have the sort of extended guitar solos and things like that that they will often have. When they play live, they have an astonishing band, the Kami band, who play with them, who are some of the best musicians I've ever seen. They're really remarkable. And so there'll be long sort of instrumental passages and such, and solo work and stuff, which is really quite remarkable.
And I thought of another intertext that we haven't mentioned to do with dance, and that's you know, those Busby Berkeley musicals, right, on film, where you have those crane kaleidoscope shots of all the dancers like this. So
yeah,
I still don't like this much. I don't like having. I like the abstract. I don't like the human figures going around and like this.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, Sujata, because that was all about the legs, isn't it?
Yes.
However, this is a very different use of that kaleidoscopic feature.
Yeah, and since you refer to the legs, you know, one of the things that I think is really striking is how non-eroticized the BabyMetal stuff tends to be. We were saying before, you know, they've been together for 10 years, so when they started out, they were quite young.
And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe when you said their actual age. They do want to portray that image, right? So what's accepted also, right? What's accepted in the commercial?
How old are they then?
Mid-20s now.
Oh wow! So they were just they really were babies when they started.
I mean, Sumat, the lead singer, is the oldest. and she was what, 14 or something when they started out, I think. And Moa is about, what, maybe I have to check, 2 years younger, a year and a half younger, something like that. Yeah.
Do we know why they wanted to make this song?
Well, it's tricky because they're also a band that keeps the backstage very much backstage. They don't allow a lot into process. When you see them interviewed, they're interviewed in full costume.
That's great. That's very smart,
actually. So it's very much a persona thing. One of the original members of the band, Yui, left like, what, 3 years ago. Nobody knows anything about what she has done since. There's no sort of virtual footprint of her private life or anything. And they're very careful. And some of this obviously is just to protect them, but it's also part of the nature of the product, right? That it's all very carefully constructed and manufactured. One of the questions, for example, with this song is that the lyric is ascribed to somebody called BabyMetal. And nobody knows who that is.
Oh, that's crazy. Do they have charge of their own money and their own image, or are they kind of, are we in a Britney Spears type horror, exploitation situation?
I wouldn't say that. No, I mean, I think that, they grew out of a Japanese idol music culture. So they are clearly sort of packaged in ways that traditional Western bands are generally not. But I think that there's also a lot of agency in terms of the development and where they go. And obviously it seems like they're, doing very well out of it and making money and so on. But a lot of this is kept very quiet. And again, it's because I think they want they want people's associations to be with the product rather than with the intrigue behind the product and how things are produced and how. So, with this album, there are a bunch of songs that partake of other cultures, and we don't know who's writing them. We don't know if BabyMetal is a code name for somebody on the inside of the team, like Koba, who's the lead producer and the sort of brains behind the outfit originally, or if this is somebody with a foot in both Indian and Japanese cultural camps. I mean, one of the songs I talked about recently is called Elevator Girl, which has a substantial English section in it. And, it turned out that the English section was written by a guy, mixed race, Japanese and white American. But we only know that because he talked about it. He came out and talked about it. The other people have not. So if they are genuinely other people from other parts of the world, we don't know. There's a song on the album called Papaya, which draws on a lot of Thai culture and features in the in the center of the song an extended rap section by a Thai rapper in Thai. So where this all comes from, we don't really know, and how it's put together, we don't really know, which is probably why we're talking about it. Sorry, Kaus, you said that it has a sort of Bollywood feel. I don't know very much about Bollywood. I know that you guys do. I know Sujata does. Am I wrong? No.
Only about like Shakespeare movies, right?
Really?
Very, very restricted. And yeah. So I don't go regularly to watch.
Yeah, I mean, when I see Bollywood, I feel that Bollywood dance takes more from like the global music industry today than anything to do with sort of any cultural roots or Indian roots or anyway. I mean, there's more hip hop in the dance, right? and this dance also sort of has that commercial appeal. So that's why in that way I am saying it's like Bollywood, complete like enmeshing of
Of things all mixed up, yeah. And I should also say, Indian film, we should be really careful to distinguish between Indian film and Bollywood, because Kaustavi's doing that really carefully, and don't know that your listeners will. A lot of people will just say Bollywood to mean any kind of Indian film, which is absurd, right? Because there are so many different traditions, vernacular traditions, languages, many of which do use dance very sensitively and in culturally appropriate ways.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say before, when you were talking about gesture, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but occasionally you'll see a version of this. And I don't know how you're reading that, but it's actually a trademark BabyMetal image.
It can't be a trademark. It's a mudra.
Well, okay, so in conventional metal, you see people do this, right?
Right. That's
right.
What I knew. Yeah.
Right, but when BabyMetal do it, they do it like this because it creates.
That's a mudra. Even I know that one.
Okay, but in their tradition, this is the kitsune. This is the fox head.
Oh.
And the fox is the emblem of BabyMetal. All right back from the beginning, that they're very immersed in forms of Shinto practice, which is associated with the fox as an sort of angelic messenger / guardian and protector. And whenever they're asked a question in an interview that they don't want to answer, their answer always is, only the fox god knows. So the kitsune is being incorporated here into the other tradition, the other Indian forms as well.
Oh, that's fun.
That's
interesting. Yeah, it's called Simhamukha. That's what it's called.
Which is lion. So it's right. I mean, so it's
four-legged.
Yeah.
So is there a particular angle that it's generally held? Because usually when they do the kitsune, it's this way up. But it seems like in the video, sometimes the palm is more lateral.
No, usually it's this way. That's okay. the sort of gravitational. But I mean, it's used in movement in various ways.
Yeah. If you, at some point, if you look up any sort of standard image, like I think they're about to be on the cover of Kerrang magazine, and the image will almost certainly have them doing this.
I do want to share that I did know this was rock because I have been in a live concert of Iron Maiden in Houston.
Oh wow!
Yes, in 2007. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was going to say, the one thing I really hated was where they have their heads on top of each other and they're doing that arm thing, because I've seen that used in so many racist contexts to mock Hindu religion. Yeah, that so that I really didn't appreciate.
I mean, true. Like it's Madonna used it when she danced with the 3 Odyssey sisters. They were called Patnaik sisters, and that idea of multi-handed female goddess. That's also a common imagery in general of. I don't know, I saw this Chai-Mi visual artist. I don't know, Andrew, if you were there. Chai-Mi, she did a piece in UNC Charlotte where she also recreated this Chinese goddess in that same modality.
Interesting. But you're not saying that the representation is intrinsically problematic, but it has been used.
But it has been used that way.
Yeah,
it's it's not quite Pepe, but
Right. Yeah. I love those little kicks.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Are many of their videos this mix of live on stage kind of performance? Do we know is this a real performance? Do they use real performance footage? And when they perform live, do they have the big screen in the background also showing other things or other performances? Because this is really a very, you know, intermedial performance, right? That they it's, you know, I don't know what you would take straight, if anything, from this, because they're commenting so extensively on mediation.
Yeah. The performance was based on the Yokohama Arena show in, I think, June of 2019. And that was, I believe, the first time the song was performed. This is something that they frequently do. They'll introduce a song in a live performance. And then they toured later that year. I shared with you the performance at the Glastonbury Rock Festival, which was the first time the song had been seen outside Japan. That was before this video was released. And then they played a series of performances, a series of other dates in the UK. It was interesting. I was looking at an interview recently where they talked about the fact that this particular song played very differently in the UK than it did in Japan. And that for some reason they singled out particularly a show that they did in Cardiff, where they said there was a large Indian population in the audience and the energy was quite different and the level of enthusiasm and excitement about the song was quite different. But what they do on stage kind of depends on where they are in the size of the venue. So with the UK shows, other than if they're playing at Wembley, you know, they're smaller shows and they'll have a big backdrop screen, but the stage itself is not that large. And so often the choreography is designed to fit a comparatively small space. But if you watch videos of them playing at the Tokyo Dome or somewhere like that, they just did 10 shows at the Budokan. And those are massive extravaganzas with huge sets and costume changes and big theatrical event. Yeah.
And are they always made up so minimally like this? And is that to do with the baby part, or is that to do with the? I don't know much about metal music, right? I mean, I'm thinking. I thought they wore makeup.
They don't wear makeup. The backing band usually does. The backing band will use sort of corpse paint and sort of very stylized makeup, but they don't. And incidentally, the baby part of BabyMetal in Japanese, heavy metal, hebi, and if you just add one little tiny stroke to the katakana on hebi, it becomes baby. So part of the initial, you know, impetus for the group, and obviously it was also because they were very young, was taking a Japanized version of heavy metal and tweaking it. So part of the issue, it's part of the reason that I've always been fascinated by them, is that sort of essential hybridity. The way that they were formed, that everything that they have done has been about having a foot in more than one camp.
I was looking at the logo, but I can see behind on your background as well. You've got the little girly love heart in the top B, and then you've got the stylized skull on the other side, right? So that's it right there.
Exactly. They're so much fun. It is an amazing thing to watch, you know, watch like this Sonosphere performance in whatever it was, 2014, 2016 in the UK. I'm watching English fans looking at them and saying, what the hell is this? And then within about 20 minutes, all just completely invested. It's an amazing thing to see. What is that slide instrument? That sort of bump that you hear, do you know what that is?
I mean, it's probably a sitar, a guitar take on a sitar, right? The typical classical sitar, Indian music sitar. And is that your question?
No, I mean the percussion that we're hearing behind it. That sort of that sort of the rhythmic bump sound. Oh, there,
I
boom.
wonder. Yeah.
Oh, it's a tabla, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tabla. It's just a tabla.
Okay. Yeah. And this is one of those sort of hybrid moments where the sitar then sort of blends into the sort of straight rock distorted guitar. Yeah.
Is there a sitar? That's my question. Or is it?
It's a woodwind flute. And I think you're right, it could be a guitar. It doesn't sound like a guitar.
Sorry,
It's
say that
not
again.
got that kind of twanginess.
Yeah, I don't know. And obviously when they're playing live, I don't think that they're not using live Indian music. And that's fairly standard, that they will always have a certain amount of pre-recorded stuff built into the live performance. The live performance is always going to be bass, drums, 2 lead guitars, and that's it. And so, you know, even other songs that have synthesizers and stuff, they almost never have. I mean, once in a while, there'll be a keyboard on stage, but a lot of the time, I think it's pre-recorded.
And that's much more like but again, that's the Bollywood playback tradition rather than, I mean, because Indian classical music is very improvisatory.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of it's almost like call and response, where I remembered, like, you know, shows where people are on the tabla and then the other guy's like back on the tabla and so on. It's,
yeah, and again, you know, this is partly the idol music tradition. There are a lot of Japanese idol bands who are singing and dancing bands and who perform live with no live instrumentation at all. That's quite common. What does that mean?
Acha, okay.
Yeah.
In Hindi.
So, I mean, overall, you've looked at the lyrics, it's a sort of a general feel-good, at one with the universe kind of song. How would you characterize it?
I don't know. I couldn't make any sense of it. And I'm a lit professor. Will you share your screen with the lyrics on again? Because I gave them just a quick look, and I looked at the Sanskrit words, but I didn't really read anything else.
Yeah, I'm looking at the lyrics now. I don't think choreographically they were trying to do anything to convey lyrical meaning, overall feel good factor. Shanti is about feel good, but there is that, I don't know, metal distortion of feel good, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's peace. It's not just feel good, because you can just, I mean, and that's certainly not peaceful, right?
Yeah, I mean, in an eerie way, isn't it? Like there is a sense of happiness at the end of the day when we see this song. There is that sense of like maybe eerie peace. I don't know why that comes to me. That word eerie comes to me.
Eerie, yeah.
I think you're right, and it's again symptomatic of a lot of the stuff that they do. That even when they're singing about, you know, calm, peaceful thoughts or emotions or ideas, whatever, it has this sort of metal edge, which is part of what makes them what they are, you know. Yeah. So that it gets that higher energy.
So explain death metal to me. Because then are they or are they not? Because one thing that strikes, okay, they're not, because the stuff about mukti, moksha, you know, and samsara, even all this is about like the cycle of rebirth and ultimate sort of the dissolution of the ego,
right,
which is partly what's eerie and frightening about it. As well as, I mean, you're supposed to strive for this dissolution, but it's terrifying.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so that's really interesting, actually, because they have dipped into that usually through a sort of more Christianized version of it. That they used to begin their concerts with a series of crucifixions.
Oh my God, so to speak.
It's fairly intense, yes, and a lot of interest in sort of in the sort of the macabre imagery of death metal. But they themselves are not considered a death metal band. They are considered a kawaii metal.
Which kawaii is cute, right?
Kawaii is cute. So
I know that from Shanghai.
Right. So BabyMetal basically originated kawaii metal. There are now other bands who do something similar, right? If you look for a band called Bandmade, or there are a number of others, you know, and mostly Japanese, but not all, right?
Can I say, I love in everything from like Pokemon to this, the Japanese punning, I don't know, what are they? There must be a word for it, but that where you've got these hyperlingual puns on what a Japanese word sounds like in English and what an English word sounds like in Japanese. Yeah. And
I think that's one of the challenges of the lyrics of a song like this, that frequently you're looking at it and you can see that part of what's going on is a kind of onomatopoetic, you know, particularly when you've got pairings of words with similar sounds, you know, and it can be quite difficult to translate because you finish up with like, you know, a 10, 12 syllable line that seems to say almost nothing, you know, because so much of it is about the sort of sonic imagery of the words themselves.
Do they release lyric sheets at all, or lyrics are not even part of it?
They will frequently, you know, when the album comes out, there will be lyric sheets printed, but they pointedly don't translate them. And of course, Japanese is a language which isn't necessarily ambiguous fundamentally, but it can be extraordinarily ambiguous, not least because you can say all kinds of things with no pronouns at all. And so where the subject lies at any given point can be very difficult to determine. And again, this is something that the producer, BabyMetal, has spoken about, saying it's deliberate because part of what they want to do is construct a sort of constructive semiotic community in which the audience are at least partially invested in the construction of their own meaning. Does that make sense? Wow. So I think that there's a sort of deliberate, open-ended quality a lot to the words. Now, you know, you could say, well, then it ultimately doesn't finally mean anything. But I think that frequently the songs will offer you a range of different interpretations. And of course, the internet is full of people, you know, arguing for their preferred reading, because that's what the internet is for.
Primary purpose.
Indeed, yes.
I saw your conversations on karuma, like that word karuma, and I was also thinking of karuna. So karma is definitely one possibility, but karuna is also a very sort of Buddhist imagery as well.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there was some question, I saw some transliterations that rendered the karuma as Garuda. And one time I thought maybe I was hearing that, but I don't know. It never got reproduced that way in the official lyric sheet. But the additional syllable, this is a very Japanese thing, right? That karma becomes karuma because there is no way
you have to have a vowel in between it.
Yeah.
Hawaiian is like that too, right? All those specific languages.
Yeah. Maybe we're running out of things to say.
I'm just waiting for my lyric sheet to open up. I had a question about the framing during the change in the color tone there, almost like sepia, and especially when they've got this kind of framing in there. That to me seems like another nostalgic allusion to old film, right? And kind of the idea of the cameo, that there's this kind of cameo on there. So I thought, I wondered about that too.
I'm still thinking about what you raised about the sort of cycle of life stuff and the potential scary element of that, because I hadn't thought about that with regard to this song, but I actually think you're right, because it is so much a part of a lot of their sort of background. Because I say they're not a death metal band, and they're not, but they do flirt with it a lot. The opening song for years in their the very first song off their first album, the song that introduces them, and they call themselves by name, is called BabyMetal Death.
Oh.
Right, and it's again a sort of pun on the homonym, because when Japanese people say death, it comes out as des, and des is the copula, meaning this is BabyMetal. We are BabyMetal.
Oh, yeah,
right.
yeah.
But what you hear, but so simultaneously, it's a statement of living and dying.
And the lyrics I've got here now open: prana of living things, the breath of living things, and then flowering of life. And if you say chakra, you're talking about a wheel, and you've got all this wheel imagery going along. And there's a Buddhist wheel, that's the samsara, right? So so that would make sense. I don't know about karuma versus karuna, and I guess that's deliberate. And then on the short syllables, Kaustavi would be the person to ask, right? To me, at one point, it sounded as though they were doing that. You know how they do in Kathak, the ta, tak, tak, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm butchering everything, but you could explain it and tell me if that sounds.
I mean, tatkar, right? I think what you're referring to is tatkar, this rhythmic sort of syllables that go with the dance.
Right.
And that's on the tabla, played on the percussion instrument as well. But here, I mean, it's a tough one, right? Like, are they doing it in a percussive way? That's a good stretch, though.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you know, part of it is clearly that what we're looking at is neither one culture nor the other, but some sort of intermediate, intermingling hybrid something. Though I think, you know, that something that you said when I first contacted you about it, Sujata, was the sense that they were also drawing on their own sort of Buddhist tradition, which where some of the words that you've just been using have, you know, find their way into Japanese Buddhism via China and Tibet.
Right, via China and Tibet. And yeah, and so I you know, I shared with you some of those images that I remember seeing from exhibitions and so on about Tibetan Buddhism, and the goddess Tara in particular, who's the consort of Avalokiteshvara, which was the one of the bodhisattvas, like one of the incarnations. He's the kind of Buddhist, the Tibetan Buddhist all-powerful deity, right, or manifestation or something. And so that's why when you say, is this cultural appropriate, I don't see how it can be, really, in the sense that there is a native Japanese Buddhist tradition, and these ideas traveled all the way across the southeast, and even the clothing, right, the shoulder pads, the kind of metal thing. I was joking and saying it's the kind of the Cardassian military uniform, right? But it's also, if you look at some of those paintings or miniatures or whatever, they look like the kind of, it's almost like not samurai exactly, but you know what I mean. That kind of the clothing is shaped this way. And I didn't, yeah.
And I think, you know, there are often in the costumes, there's often this sort of gesture towards armor, while simultaneously also being sort of distinctly cute and feminine, because BabyMetal.
Their messaging is really coded and layered. In
a good way, and in an interesting way.
I think so. At least I really like this song.
I'm enjoying it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I call that a win.
Yeah, totally.
See if we can finish it out.
You know, the movements that they do, they are the typical movements that you see in musical theaters that are like Bollywood. There was a musical theater, right, that came out of UK. So, right, like there's this typical imaginary Bollywood imaginary particular waist movements and hand movements and yeah, the other one was the dipping movement. It's a very typical movement that I see that are from that, imagination of India.
Imagination, yeah. With bits from ballet too, right? Like the arabesque, and then don't forget the walk like an Egyptian.
Yeah, their primary choreographer is a woman called Mikiko, who, I don't know if you've come across her. She's quite prominent in Japan. She has been involved in the Olympics and things like that. And there was some talk, I mean, it's looking increasingly like the Olympics are not going to happen, but there was talk about having BabyMetal
How do you know there was Olympic dancing?
I mean, in the like opening, closing ceremonies type stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like, ballroom dancing at Cambridge was a half blue. Anyway.
But no, as I said, there has been talk about BabyMetal playing at the Olympics, which would actually be, I think, be kind of great because of all the things we've been talking about that hybridity and the sort of curious obsessions with strength. And at some point I'm going to send you more videos. You're going to wish I'd never mentioned this to you.
Did they do anything with, you mentioned that they were interested in the Shinto tradition. So do they do stuff with all the Japanese folk tale and spiritual traditions too?
Yeah, I mean, part of what makes the third album different is that in some ways it's the least Japanese album.
Okay.
So the first album, which is just called BabyMetal, is full of Japanese cultural references, many of which are quite obscure because they were clearly thinking of themselves as an exclusively Japanese act. And the second album, after Gimme Choco became a big sort of global hit, is more outward looking. So its version of Japan is a little bit more West friendly, they're singing less obscure songs about foxes and more about karate. And then this album is, the next step of their sort of evolution. And the fans are, myself included, have somewhat mixed feelings about the extent to which they push away from where they started, because there's the danger that in the process they lose what made them distinctive, but we'll see. I mean, hopefully there'll be a new album soon, and we'll see. I really want to thank you. This has actually changed the way I think about the song, and particularly that stuff about the darker side of it, because it is so sort of upbeat that you forget that some of the lyrical stuff is sort of foregrounding.
It's the minor scale also, right? If there is that little bit of a minor scale, I'm not a musicologist by any means, but use of that also gives you that melancholy, little bit of that.
Yeah. And I think, even if you listen to other BabyMetal songs, they sound very different from this vocally, because part of obviously what they're trying to do is get something of that sort of Indian stylistic component to it as well.
Yeah, I don't know enough about like rags and things to figure out if it's in a ragam or like a Western minor key. But Hindustani music uses keys like Western music, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you again. It was so nice to meet you, Sujata, and thank you for thinking of me, Andrew. You did email me long back, and I'm sorry I lost that email in whatever,
It's interesting, because I actually messaged both of you months and months ago, and neither of you responded.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh!
And no, it's okay, but it sort of it re-emphasized to me why I wanted to do it, because I suddenly thought, is it inappropriate for me to ask?
Oh, no.
You know what I mean?
No.
And I think, one of the things about being an academic, as you know, is that you're acutely conscious of what you don't know and how there are people around you who know so much more. But sometimes when it comes to these sort of cross-cultural issues, particularly, there's a sense, an anxiety about putting people under kind of the labor of emotional responsibility for having to explain things to people.
But you're okay here because I'm British Indian. I'm not Indian, not Indian, as I'm always saying, right? So I'm ignorant, and I don't have to do an awful lot of emotional labor on it in that sense.
But also I can show you, Andrew, many more Bollywood songs that have done worse cultural appropriation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many more.
Well, I really wanted, and let me also say for everybody watching, obviously when you're talking about issues of ethnicity and culture, there are no monoliths, and people are going to respond in different ways, and some people will be happy with it and some people won't be happy with it, and that's fine. But I just didn't want to be the lone voice talking about this one.
And we can reiterate, we don't believe, I mean, we are agreed there is no like pure culture for any of us, and there shouldn't be. We're all a beautiful mix.
Yep.
Echo and ditto.
Excellent. Well, that seems like a good point to stop. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate you guys talking to me, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thank you,
you,
Andrew. Thank you, Kaustavi. Bye.